Ți se pare un miraj și o zonă dinamică în continuare? Asta vorbim așa de resurse umane, dăm și noi până vine lumea în sală câteva insight-uri din TV.
Cred că s-a mai pierdut din acel miraj în momentul în care faci parte din această echipă, din acest domeniu și ai niște ani de călătorie în spate, nu ți se mai pare, nu știu, așa fermecător, totul un miraj. Se pierde din miraj, dar într-adevăr este ceva aparte și e foarte plăcut să faci ceea ce îți place.
Da. Iată, ne ajungi ușor în cel de-al doilea panel al zilei de astăzi.
Timpul trece foarte, foarte repede și în această seară avem parte și de o petrecere. Cred că mulți dintre noi sunt cu gândul la acea petrecere. Sunt recunoscute aceste partiuri ale lui Doru.
Păi până la urmă, știi cum e, se spunea tot timpul că cele mai bune informații pe care le ia un om la locul de muncă sunt cele pe care le are în pauza de țigară.
Le afli în pauză, sau în team building, sau la petreceri.
Petreceri sau la toalete mai erau discuții, dar asta e altă discuție. Bun, sunt foarte multe lucruri tare dinamice care se întâmplă. Pentru cei care, mă rog, nu știți, la mine background-ul este de jurnalist de business, realizator de emisiuni economice de 16 ani și urmărim parcursul economic al României de la vremurile respective până în momentul de față. Ne-am schimbat foarte mult ca generații, ca mentalitate, ca respect, ca poziționare, ca statut în Europa doar și în continuare cred că avem foarte multe lucruri de completat la noi, pentru că structura și ADN-ul generațiilor care vin din perspectivă work of force, cred că e una foarte bună, dar trebuie să înțelegem că se schimbă complet cadrul de muncă, așa că tocmai bine pică un astfel de eveniment într-un moment de schimbare, de cotitură, pentru că nu știu dacă știți, dar cred că din anul acesta, dacă nu mă înșel, urmează să intre în câmpul muncii generațiile Z, la nivel global. Deci intră un nou val de muncitori pe piață și va schimba cu totul tot ce înseamnă work of force.
O generație total altfel față de cea dinainte, sigur.
Și acum, pentru că vă spuneam și menționa și Simona că speakerii acestei ediții sunt la nivel internațional din foarte multe țări, mergem acum și călătorim puțin în zona Statelor Unite ale Americii. Un speaker global în zona resurselor umane, a leadership-ului, a tehnologiei și afacerilor. De asemenea, vă menționez că îndeplinește și funcția de CPO, Chief People Officer, al The Granite Group din Concord, United States. Doamnelor, domnilor, în aplauzele dumneavoastră, Tracie Sponenberg.
Welcome.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and I'm thrilled to be here. This is my first visit to Romania, so what a beautiful country. And in addition to being a speaker is something that I do kind of on the side. I've been working in the world of human resources for 30 years, 25 of those leading HR, 9 as a chief people officer. I actually just recently left my company. I had a great CEO who let me do all kinds of cool things, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. So what you'll hear about today is the future of human resources from a practical practitioner's perspective. I've lived it, like a lot of you have lived it. How many are working in human resources right now? So most everyone, right? Great. So hopefully some of this resonates with you. I asked a bunch of my friends to share a little bit about their thoughts of the future of human resources. So there are some takeaways, certainly, but this is what I think it's going to look like hopefully in the coming years, and how it's evolving, and a little bit about how I evolved along with it. So my focus area has been small and medium-sized businesses. I've worked in companies with 125 people and with 50,000 people, but most of my time has been spent in mid-sized businesses. And in the US, small businesses, which are defined as about under 500 people, make up about 99.9% of all businesses in the United States. Anybody work for a company with 500 people or less? Okay. How about 10,000 or more? So it's a little bit all over. So that's been my experience. I've worked in both, but hopefully you'll find some things that resonate with you. And about half of the people in the US work for small and medium-sized businesses. So that's my general experience. Before we jump into things, I want to talk a little bit about the history of human resources because I think this is super, super interesting. So our profession has been around really since the late 1800s and was founded as a way to really keep people from dying on the job because workers were literally dying on the job. That evolved into paying people, into supporting unions, and then eventually in the mid-1900s into the beginnings of what we see as human resources today. But the profession's evolving again. For a lot of you, I think you may be already there. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time on something I put together that explained in a way that resonated with me and with my fellow HR professionals a little bit about legacy human resources versus modern human resources. So I grew up in a world of legacy human resources. I started in HR in the mid-90s, and I was trained on compliance. I was trained to lead with compliance. I was trained to chase people around with forms, to sign forms. I was trained to tell people no. And that's how I led for a long time. So I learned to be administrative, that HR is just an administrative function. HR often reported into the CFO. HR often was, sitting in the back corner doing paperwork. And that's how I learned, doing payroll record keeping. We were reactive, we were siloed, and we were really creating one-size-fits-all policies. So we were, I've done this before, like somebody would come to me and complain, okay, Bob is doing something bad, so I would write a policy instead of talking to that person. And then we were very hierarchical, and HR was the enforcer. And where we're really moving, and some, I think, of us have evolved there, some will continue to evolve, but this is really where we are, hopefully now, or we're getting there, to being strategic partners, connecting people strategy to the business strategy, really embedding diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into everything that we do. A very strong focus on personalization and the employee experience. And you'll hear a little bit about my experience at the Granite group, which I just left a few months ago. And our purpose as a team, we were a people team, was to co-create with our people an incredible individual employee experience. So we did everything that we did. We took that employee experience, we married that with the business goals, and we created something that would really help our people grow and thrive. We're very proactive now. We prevent problems through good process, strategy, and practices. If you've ever referred to yourself as a firefighter who's running around putting out fires, we're trying to move on from that and trying to prevent those problems before they happen. And we're data-driven. We're making data-driven decisions. This is intentionally a presentation without a lot of data. We'll talk about a little of it, but I wanted to get into more of the thoughts and the feelings a little bit from myself and from others. And this is something I'd like to say, we've really evolved from paper first to people first. So I used to wake up in the morning when I first started and think about the piles of paper on my desk and how I would get through all of those. And recently, I'd wake up in the morning and think about how I can help our people thrive. So I think it's fun talking about, we talked about perception earlier today. I think it's a little bit fun to not necessarily poke fun at us, but to kind of look at a little bit like, what do people think of HR, right? What do people think of HR? Sometimes they think we're therapists. We are not therapists. These are some TV therapists and some stock photo therapists. We are not. But if I had $1 for every time someone said when they left my office, I feel like I've just been through therapy. Well, I think some of you probably feel that way either. And if you watch The American Office, this is Toby Flenderson. We are not this either. So this is legacy human resources, very much represents where we've been, what we've done, not what we really can do. So what do we actually do? So I like to think about human resources as sitting at the intersection of science and art. And I would love if we got to a place of wonder with all of our people. That's maybe a little bit too much to hope for, but I would love if we got to a place of wonder. But some of what we do is an art, some of what we do is a science, and we really exist at the blending of the two, and it moves around, but that's really where we sit now. And I'm a huge pop culture fan, so you'll see a lot of movie references anytime you see me speak. So hopefully you can identify some of these. I talk about us, and I want to break these down a little bit, as coaches, consultants, guides, and architects. So if you ask someone, what does human resources do? I did this with my last executive team, and I got a variety of different answers, which was kind of scary. But, people may say benefits, people may say paperwork, people may say a number of different things, but I want them to say coaches, consultants, guides, and architects. And coaches, meaning I spent a lot of my time coaching managers, coaching individuals in how to have difficult conversations, how to give feedback, how to understand what they wanted with their career, how to be a better leader. I spent a lot of time doing that. And I thought of myself, now I'm an external consultant, and I do the same thing for businesses and distribution, manufacturing, and other spaces. But now I was an internal consultant who would really partner with the business, particularly with the CEO. I worked for the CEO, and really help him have the business grow through its people. And the last two businesses I was in, and this is not exclusively because of me, but I played a part of it, more than tripled in the revenue, more than tripled in the growth. And so HR does play a part if companies let HR play a part. So consultants in that way. Guides, we're helping our people as they go along in their journey. That journey is going to look vastly different in the near term and certainly in the far term, but we're helping them along in their journey. I like to say now we help people help themselves, and we help them discover where they need to go. And we're architects. We're architects of the employee experience. And this is also who we really are. You'll see AI pop up a lot in this conversation, because this is something, who's using AI in their work every day? Good. That's a lot more than I've ever seen when I've talked about this in the United States, so that's wonderful. So these are both AI-generated photos with a very simple prompt. HR as superheroes and confident HR professionals. Now, I think AI is interesting and problematic and all kinds of things, but it's here to stay, and I thought it would be fun to weave in some of that. And this is a little bit more of who we are, and these are some words that over the course of me talking about human resources in various places and countries and states, that come to mind now. Feedback, compassion, brave, confident, empathetic, vulnerability. We heard about that a little bit earlier. I don't specifically call out vulnerability here, but I want to talk about that because that's something we're talking a lot about in leadership now. And I experienced a significant death during COVID. And during COVID, I was leading my company's pandemic response. We had 60 in-person locations that kept operating because it was an essential business. And it was just really, really tough. And so I told this story to my leadership team, and my mother had died, and I couldn't see her. It was really tough. It was several years ago. I'm doing fine. My dad's doing fine. But I talked about it in a leadership team meeting in front of 40 people. It was virtual, of course. And I talked about it because I wanted people to see, you don't know how somebody feels. You don't know what that looks like. You don't know what people are bringing into work. And so vulnerability, and my CEO got on after and talked about vulnerability being a strength. And this is something that we're just starting to get more comfortable with in the United States. And I think, I'm not sure how it is in your countries, but this is something that we're going to see more and more leaders coming forward and talking about failure, talking about mistakes, talking about grief, talking about loss. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So bottom line, HR is people, we know that. People are the business, and HR is the business. We're a business function partly responsible for companies' growth and certainly responsible for bringing out the best in people. It is, in the end, about making money. It's about performance, and we can be catalysts to have that happening. So I wanted to bring in my thoughts a little bit from my experience, or a lot from my experience, doing this for a very, very long time. But in addition to working in human resources, I've created a couple of communities of over 1,000 people, and I've co-created a number of other communities with many, many, many more, and regularly participate in future of work, incubators, thoughts, things like that. So this is not just me deciding one day, hey, I think this. This comes through a lot of exploration, research, etc. So what does the future of HR look like? It looks a lot like the future of work. I think I'm not going to make big, bold predictions. I'm going to share with you several things that are and will be influencing the future of work and the future of HR. And I think in the future, they'll be basically indistinguishable. We're already seeing HR tech turn into work tech, and we're seeing the term HR really disappear and evolve into people. I included this slide first because I think, and I don't love talking about generations, because I think we're really more alike than we are not alike. But I think this is really important. I have 3 children who are Gen Z, and they range in age from 18 to 25. And I'm learning so much from them. I'm learning from my former Gen Z employees and my friends who are Gen Z. This generation is changing the world of work, and I'm thrilled. Some of you may be horrified because it's a lot of change. I know my managers at my last company were super frustrated in a lot of ways, but a lot of what you see coming up is going to be influenced by Gen Z because they are not asking, they're demanding. They're moving jobs quicker. They don't want traditional employment. These are broad generalizations, some do. My son is a real outlier. I think he wants to be in the same job for 40 years, and he's the only person that I know that's like that, but for the most part. And they're all digital natives. They grew up with a phone in their hand. You know, we talked about this not too long ago. My son, I think, was 14 when he got a phone. I think our other daughter was 12, and then our youngest was 10, and it's probably now 8, 6, 5. So it gets younger and younger and younger, and kids are exposed to more and more, and that gives them more information. Some of that's good, some of that is really not. And then 77% of Gen Z workers want diversity, an employee that values differences. And this is something that I'm Gen X, we did not talk about. And independence. So 69% prefer a private office over an open workspace. And that's something that really impacts what we called in the US return to office, right? So we are seeing more and more companies force people back to work in the office 5 days a week, if not 5, then a few. And so Gen Z is going, no, I don't want to do that. Here's another AI-generated photo, and this was prompted by me asking DALL-E to generate a picture of generative AI and human resources. It's a little strange, but it's kind of fun, and I love that so many people are using AI every day because it's here, and it's not going anywhere. It's changing, it's a little problematic, it's a little bit wrong, it's a little bit stupid right now in some ways. So we had a discussion the other night about ChatGPT resumes, and you can tell, you can often tell. But it's learning, and it's getting smarter, and it's getting smarter. One of the tools that I love to use when I'm researching for things is called Perplexity, which is, some people have heard. Has anybody heard of Perplexity AI? It's research-based, so it's really fun. It gives you the sources, because I've done a number of searches where the information is just wrong, so you can actually go back and check them. So that's really interesting to use. And we're going to see this in all kinds of ways, everything from automating the day-to-day to AI as a coach. I did a session last year at a distribution conference on AI as your personal coach, to thought partner, to who knows. But it's here to stay. Flexibility for all. This is a picture of my actual office. I think this was a couple of years ago. I see a holiday picture from a couple of years ago. So it was a couple of years ago. When the pandemic happened, I pulled my whole team out of the office because we were responsible for pandemic response. And then some people came back and we did that. So I ended up working from home, which was the first time in my life I had ever done it. And I loved it. I thrived there. Some people on my team did not. And so what we tried to do was really create flexibility. My company had 60 locations that were in person every day. So there was an argument, those of us that worked at the corporate office, did we have to be in the office just because everybody else did, right? And so that was a real tough thing to work through. And so what we ended up doing was having a lot of conversations and giving as much flexibility as humanly possible to everybody. Because somebody who had to serve a customer at 7 o'clock in the morning couldn't do that from home. And so that forced us to look at new ways of doing things. And I think when we talk about remote work, we talk about that. I prefer to talk about flexibility or look at it through that lens of flexibility for everyone, because that's something that not everybody can work remotely. Flexibility in some way, shape, or form, yes, that we can do. Has anybody heard of fractional executives or fractional consultants? Okay, so it was new to me maybe a year and a half ago, and I actually left the corporate world to become a fractional consultant. And what that is basically I'm a chief people officer for a fraction of full time. So I have a client now that's very few hours a week. I had a client that was a lot of hours a week, and that can vary. But I go in and I serve as a chief people officer for companies who need that strategic help. So I'm not involved in the day-to-day. I know the people, I know some things, but I go and I help with strategy. I help move the business forward through its people. I help one of my specialties is HR transformation in distribution and manufacturing, so I do some of that technology work. So I'm a fractional executive. And when you think about, if you're an executive, think about how much of your job is truly strategy-based, right? And this may be a new concept for a lot of you, but this is something my friends and I talk a lot about, that small businesses, particularly medium-sized businesses, may choose to bring in a number of people in their executive team on a part-time basis and bring in consultants. My husband went back as a CFO as a nonprofit, a mental health nonprofit last fall, partly so I could come out and do this, and because we have to think about these real things like benefits. And before that, for 10 years, he was a fractional CFO. We just didn't call it that. So he would go into businesses and help them solve their problems. So when I say the future is fractional, we're going to see more and more and more and more and more companies over the next few years choose to hire, or maybe not choose to hire. Maybe they can't find that person that's going to add to their team in the way they need to add. They're going to choose to hire fractional executives. This is part of my old team, and I use them as an example of upskilling, reskilling, continuous learning, and we're also going to see a lot of this. Janet, who's in the back, has been in the working world for well over 40 years, and she had done a number of positions in the business, came into HR, knew nothing about HR technology, didn't even know most of it existed. She learned, she led implementations, she helped transform the company, learned a new skill that's valuable to her going forward. Monica on the right is now the VP of HR, who I'm still working with. They're Granite Group's a client of mine, and she came from accounting. So she had to reskill and learn human resources. And then continuous learning. And learning is going to look, we're not talking about it a lot today, will look completely different. Completely different than it does sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day for a week. That's part of it. That's not going to be all. There was a recent article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about the rise of the trades. And young people, whereas the past couple of generations, haven't been going into things like plumbing and becoming electricians so much, but we're starting to see that turn around. We're starting to see kids in the US not necessarily always choose college, choose an alternative path, and they can make lots and lots and lots of money working for themselves or working for others in the trades. And so my company served the trades. So these are 3 women. One came up from within the trades, 2 didn't but learned. And that segment is going to look, I think, a little bit different. We're going to see more and more people going into this and choosing to because they don't want to do that traditional college path. Here's another picture of my old company in one of our warehouses there. And frontline managers are key. When I first started, we had never, ever done leadership training, never. And so we started with our executives, and then we rolled to our branch managers, and then we created an emerging leaders program because we realized we were promoting people. You know, you are the best salesperson. Congratulations, you are now a manager. Here you go, good luck. And that's how we were handling things. And so we created these programs to make sure people had the tools that they needed to succeed. And frontline managers are doing a lot of the work that HR used to do. No longer do managers send people to HR for discipline, for performance. That's all happening with the managers. We're consulting them, we're guiding them, we're coaching them through that. But they're the key to everything. So they better be well trained, and they really better be compensated well, and they better understand what their role is and how critical they are to the company. And that's been a really neglected segment of the population for a long time. We touched, this is another AI-generated photo of a choose-your-own-adventure in work. We touched on this earlier with Gen Z. I think really this is going to be at the crux of what work's going to look like, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with my last slide, but work will not look like it does now. And so my company, we were seeing that already. It was harder and harder to hire people, not because there were less people out there, but because fewer people wanted to work in that particular job from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. So we were having to rethink how we'd worked. We were rethinking what shifts looked like. We were rethinking how we could attract people differently. Now lots of things have happened since then. We've had a lot of layoffs, particularly in the tech sector, so it's a little bit easier in that sense. But we're going to see more and more people like me who left. I never thought until a few years ago, never thought I would leave the 9 to 5, leave the corporate world. Never, ever, ever. I'm 52. Like, I thought I would be working there till I was 65 or 70. But I chose a different path, and we're seeing more and more people do that. And we're not ready. So this is part of what we need to do, is kind of design for what that workplace is going to look like. These are a bunch of my friends, some of whom I met for the first time when this picture was taken, and all of them I met on LinkedIn, which is one area of community. So I have a variety of different communities I belong to. They helped save me during the pandemic when I was trying to figure out what the heck to do. They've been there for me. Hopefully they're there for you too. If you need any good recommendations of HR communities, I can recommend lots of them. But we're seeing this with younger people too. It may look a little different than it did to me. It may look like it's online. It may look like it's somewhere else other than TikTok, something, for example. There may be a community there, right? And it looks different, but that is going to play into work and how we do things. When I left my last job, what we were doing was building internal communities, because people shouldn't learn just from the company pushing out information to them. They should learn a variety of different ways, including from each other. So we were building these online communities because it was a really dispersed workforce, so people could learn from people that are doing the job or did the job that they had. This may seem a little bit out of left field, but this is yet another AI-generated picture on storytelling in HR. And you can see as I've been talking, I've woven in some of my experiences, some of my stories, and that's going to be critical to how we move forward. Some of you are already doing that, but if you think of, if you're trying to create a business case for a new piece of software, if you're trying to explain to people why they should use this new service that you're offering. Storytelling plays into all that we do, and it's very, very, very powerful. I'm not a great storyteller. I'm okay. I know some people who are fantastic, but this is something that it comes naturally to me to just talk and tell stories, however good or bad that they are. And we talked about this earlier too, neurodiversity. And I mention this because I've talked to a number of HR leaders lately in the United States who didn't know what neurodiversity was, and that's okay. I think it's up to 50%, I could be getting this wrong, roughly up to 50% of Gen Z identifies as neurodiverse, and there are a lot of different parts that go into that, but we primarily look at it through the lens of autism and ADHD are the most common. There are others as well. And I bring this up because as we see more and more people who identify as neurodiverse, workplaces are designed not for them. And so they need different things. And I say I'm neurodiverse as well, as are 4 out of 5 of my family members. So having lived that experience and seeing, the workplace isn't designed for me. It isn't designed for my daughter. It isn't designed for my son. It really, I'm passionate about trying to change that. And it's not a bad thing. People have different brains. They have different ways of thinking. And so we need to take a look at that and take a look at the workplace and how we design that. Does anybody talk about mental health at work? If you do, you might not raise your hand. I ask about this because we're getting better in the United States, but I was recently in Australia and talking with someone who was like, we never talk about this at work. And I get that, so because it's uncomfortable to talk about, or let alone identify if you have a mental health issue. But it's getting more common. I have a friend who I met when I endorsed her book, but wrote a book on mental health at work, and I have a slide later that shows you what that's called. But we're talking more and more about mental health at work, especially over the past few years. The past few years, we've seen an uptick in, we have something called the Family Medical Leave Act in the United States, where people can, our leave is terrible, but people can take 12 weeks of unpaid time off to deal with an issue that they have, or if they have a baby, or adopt a baby. And we're seeing short-term disability, which is paid. Short-term disability leaves skyrocket because of mental health issues, because of what was left behind after the pandemic. And so we're really trying to talk more about it, to have these conversations, to ask simply, how are you doing today? How's your mental health? I trained my former managers in how to have those conversations, and they were really difficult. But funny thing happens, when you ask people, they tell you. They usually will tell you when you ask the right way. So it's important to have those conversations. I didn't want to just leave this to my thoughts on what the future of work look like. I wanted to bring in some thoughts from friends of mine who I consider some of the best minds in the field. And these are people that you may not have heard of. And so I wanted to shine a light on some of the things they talk about and share a little bit of my thoughts here. This is my friend Tara, who talks about the intersection of talent acquisition and DEI. Your candidates and employees will be your customers, and your customers will be your candidates and employees. If you think about that for a second, like, we often treat our customers much better than we treat the people who work in our company. How you show up for these communities is critical to the health and strength of your business. We don't compartmentalize anymore. The world is evolving too fast for that. She's a founder and a consultant and worked in the field of talent for years. This is my friend Danielle Farage. She talks about the employee-employer relationship is a two-way street. She's a Gen Z expert, and she's one of my go-tos. She is in that generation, one of my go-to experts for all things Gen Z. And what she means by that is, it used to be, you come to work, you do whatever the employer tells you, you go home for the day, and that's it. And we're now talking more and more about that, about work as a relationship, kind of like a partnership. You may have a family partnership, hopefully not quite like your family, but any kind of partnership, it's a partnership, it's not one-sided. This is Phil Strazula. He's founder of a company called Select Software Reviews, which is one of the single best resources I've ever found for HR tech. You can talk to someone for free, email with an expert for free. He's a serial founder and he just loves giving back to the HR community. So he's my go-to for all things tech. So he talks about AI is everywhere. He thinks the next 2 years will be full of AI use cases that will automate anything that resembles a standard procedure. So anything that you have a procedure for will likely be done by AI in the next couple of years. So he gives an example of talent sourcing. AI can easily understand a job rec, build a short list of candidates, email those candidates, and schedule them on a recruiter's calendar. It can do that now. It's going to be able to do just about everything. It's already creating presentations in Canva. You can do it's almost there. I expect us to be there. It's almost there with helping automate these things. Part of what I do is partner with tech companies and help them kind of understand what that looks like from an HR perspective, what their product may look like. And I'm looking at a few HR tech companies right now that are all AI, that are all automating questions. So you think chatbot. Yes, a chatbot, but much beyond that. This is Future Kane. She is not in the HR space, but works adjacent. She's a former educator, and she's now a consultant in really helping people look at intersectionality. So she talks about living and leading well. If you're not living well as a leader, you can't function at optimal levels. And so one of the things I did during the pandemic and then kind of lost it and then found it again was I exercised every morning. I ate super healthy because I needed to be really sharp. I needed to be on top of things. I was trying to live as well as I could in a really tough time. And so that's something that she wanted to bring to the table and get across here. This is Stacy Nordwall. She's a VP of People for a company called PIN. And PIN is a piece of technology that knits together the employee experience through different moments that matter using AI, and it can it can send an email from your CEO on somebody's anniversary date. It can do anything that you can find in a system you can automate. And there's also a free employee journey map. By the way, I'm not paid by any of these people. I just really like technology and really like these things. So she talks about the way that we work and the jobs that we do. Employees' expectations have all changed. And so we're at an inflection point where leaders need to work with business leaders to quickly and strategically adapt to meet the moment. And she talks a lot, no surprise, about technology. Technology can be a catalyst for us moving the business forward. This is Anessa Fike. She was my coach when I looked into getting into fractional. She was one of the earliest fractional HR leaders and talks about HR seeing change, dramatic change, and talent executives becoming internal consultants, internal communications consultants, chief people officers, building out their teams to include more adaptable structures, etc. And this is Alex Seiler, who's one of my best friends and one of the smartest people I've ever met. I learned a ton from him. And I love this quote because this is something in HR we're not always good at, being selfish, taking care of ourselves first. If you've heard about, you're going to need to fill your bucket before you can fill someone else's, live for yourself. So I thought that was really cool, and hopefully we do see a lot more of that. This is Jessica Winder. You may know her from LinkedIn. She's got a big following on LinkedIn, but she talks a little bit about keeping up with fast tech and worker advances and creating talent destinations. And this is a really interesting concept. So her idea is that designing your workplace for people only being there 2 years or less. So we want people to come and stay because it takes so long to train people, come and stay for a long period of time. What if we looked at that differently and expected people to stay only 2 years because they're only staying 2 years anyway? And I saved maybe the best for last. This is going to be interesting. Employment is dead. So this is Josh Dreen. They're all friends of mine. He's another friend of mine. He's a metaverse expert that hasn't quite taken off like we thought it would. But he wrote a book that's coming out early next year called Employment is Dead. And it talks about the fundamental structure of work being outdated. And we kind of talked about this throughout. So what's going to happen in the next few years? Are we going to continue to go into work every day like we do, sit in front of our computer, or is it going to look vastly different? I think it's going to look vastly different, and I think maybe we're not quite at the situation where we're all sitting down and wearing headsets and looking at avatars of each other. That may come, but a lot of us in this room may be working for ourselves, if you're not already, maybe working for ourselves in the near future. We may be stitching together a number of different jobs to make something that really helps us thrive in this world. Or we may want that traditional employment, but we're at a situation now where employment has changed fully, and we're not going back. And if you want to scan that, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll put up another slide later, but I want to highlight a few of my friends here. If you want to take a picture, or I think you'll have the presentation as well. And some books, a newsletter that I can recommend if you want to follow more topics like this and follow these people on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to connect you to any of them if you're interested in that. And thank you very much for having me, and I'll see you back at the Q&A.
Thank you so much. Please stay with us for a few minutes. We're going to make a short Q&A right now because the subject is so warm.
Oh, okay.
And it's much better to be people who have the questions right now, being the subject warm. So, doamnelor, domnilor, facem acum rapid o scurtă sesiune de Q&A. Avem 3 întrebări pe care le vom pune în momentul acesta, așa că hai să eficientizăm timpul să aflăm cât mai multe informații. So, we can have the first question is here in the front for the, please, one microphone here. Really nice topics. Really nice.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Very nice presentation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you about the future jobs. You said something like regarding the fact that if you have a procedure, this kind of work will be replaced by AI. If you make an estimation of the jobs that will no longer exist,
That's a good question. I should have known when I said that I would have that difficult question. I don't know, but it's happening now, at least in large companies, it's starting to happen now. I used to say that AI won't replace you. Someone who knows AI will. I don't know if that's 100% true, but if you can think of any job that's solely, say in a large company you have, I'll give you some examples, HR analytics teams, financial analytics teams, that job will be able to be performed by AI. People who are writing communications, that job will be able to be performed by AI. Whether we want it to or not is TBD, but maybe ask me in a year and I'll have a better example. Some, but not everybody. If you can think strategically, creatively, you have emotion, we can't replace that yet.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I will ask you next year again.
Yes.
That's a great topic. We have another question, please. Over there in the back, acolo în spate, în partea...
Good morning, all. Good morning, Tracie. Thank you for all the knowledge that you brought here. Stelian Bogza is my name. And I have one question to you so in your presentation, you were saying at some point, HR is people. Then people is business. Mm-hmm. And then HR is business.
Yes.
So people is business, right? But then you said that a community is everything.
Yes.
So is becoming humankind from business to community and from community to everything?
I think that's a good question. I think when I talk about people being the business, we would not have a business without people. and we would not have a business without human resources. I think we're seeing community become more and more popular for a lot of different reasons, but I also think that's really important. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but really important in business as well. But people are not, the business only exists because of its people, and people are much more than business. So I think that's what I didn't quite get across properly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mulțumim tare mult. Mai avem o întrebare. Am spus să luăm 3 întrebări la acest moment. We have another question? Vă rugăm? No?
Okay.
I'll address to you the
Good.
last
Thank
question.
you very much. Thank
No?
you. No?
I have one question
Oh,
for
you
me.
have a question.
Because I
Okay.
spoke at the beginning when I made the introduction for you, I spoke about the Gen Z, those born between 1997 and 2012, I guess. So they're changing the entire ecosystem of
Yes.
workforce. How do companies can be so much reliable on this type of new Gen Z workers, like the screenagers,
Yep.
or how are they called? They can rely on this type of new workforce in the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to, I think by 2030, it's going to be half of the workforce, I think. And I think what I've done and what I would recommend people is get focus groups, do surveys, talk to as many people in that age group as you can. And you want work to be designed for everybody, but you want to design it not just for, but with that new generation, because they want different things and it's going to look different. I think what we've done in business typically is go, this is the way it is, and you have to fit into our mold. And what we need to think about now is how can we fit these jobs to our people instead of putting our people into jobs.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.